Poor food truck owner fed a guy every day, unaware he's a millionaire, and falls in love with her. Comment below where you're enjoying this story from. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the glass towers of downtown when Rachel Chen fired up the griddle in her food truck, Street Karma. The sizzle of oil against steel drowned out the echo of her father's last words. "Money is everything, sweetheart. Remember that." He'd said it during their final video call, hours before his empire crumbled and he chose a coward's exit over facing the families he'd destroyed. Through the serving window, she watched early commuters hurry past the luxury condos that had replaced the vibrant street market her father's development company had demolished. The original vendors, many of whom had served food here for generations, had been forced out by rising rents and predatory loans. Now, 3 years later, his daughter served $3 tacos in their memory, each plate an act of penance for sins she hadn't committed but felt compelled to right. Rachel adjusted her simple apron, the cotton a far cry from the designer clothes that still hung untouched in her other life's closet. Her Yale business degree and the millions hidden in offshore accounts remained her carefully guarded secrets. Here, she was just Rachel, the food truck owner who made the best fusion tacos in the city and never turned away a hungry customer. Old Mr. Jiang shuffled past her truck, pulling his dim sum cart that had somehow survived the neighborhood's revitalization. He was one of the few original vendors left, hanging on through a combination of stubborn determination and the anonymous benefactor who'd mysteriously paid off his loans. Rachel smiled, remembering the night she'd arranged that particular act of redemption. "Morning, Miss Rachel," he called, his weathered face crinkling with genuine warmth. "Today feels lucky, yes." Before she could respond, a commotion drew their attention. A younger vendor was arguing with two men in expensive suits development company representatives, judging by their matching portfolios and predatory smiles. Rachel's hands tightened on her spatula. She knew those smiles, had seen them around her father's dinner table as he'd planned his next urban renewal project. The young vendor's food cart bore a hastily written "For Sale" sign, and his shoulders carried the distinctive slump of someone fighting a losing battle against poverty and progress. Rachel recognized the look. She'd seen it too many times in the mirrors of her father's victims. "Another one about to fall," Mr. Jiang sighed, shaking his head. "Soon, only glass towers will remain." Rachel watched the suits walk away, already calculating how to channel some of her hidden wealth through enough layers to help without revealing her identity. Her father had built his empire by destroying street-level businesses. She would rebuild community one meal, one vendor, one act of anonymous kindness at a time. Marcus Shaw stared at the projection screen in his penthouse office, watching the real-time data from his company's latest app. Urban Eats was revolutionizing the food service industry, or at least that's what the press releases claimed. In reality, he was watching small businesses disappear from his digital map in real time, replaced by chain restaurants that could afford his platform's premium fees. Another record quarter, James Chen, his CFO and oldest friend, announced proudly, "The enterprise accounts are loving the predictive ordering system. Those mom-and-pop places can't compete with our efficiency algorithms." Marcus minimized the map, uncomfortable with the pattern of disappearing icons. His divorce had left him questioning everything, especially after discovering his ex-wife had been orchestrating business deals through their entire marriage. Even their adopted son had stopped calling once his trust fund vested. Now, every relationship felt like a transaction, every kindness suspect. "We should get lunch," James suggested, already pulling up the app. "That new fusion place downtown has a perfect optimization score." But Marcus was watching the street 11 stories below, where a line of people wrapped around a food truck painted with swirling karma symbols. The owner, a young woman in a simple apron, moved with practiced efficiency, but it was her interactions that caught his attention. She seemed to know every customer, her genuine smile visible even from his height. "I think I'll try something different today," Marcus said, already reaching for his jacket. The street-level experience was a shock to his system. the scent of grilling meat and spices mixed with car exhaust and humanity. The food truck's menu was written on a chalkboard in elegant handwriting. Street Karma. Pay what feels right. Marcus watched as customers named their price without hesitation, many adding extra for the next person who couldn't afford a meal. The owner, Rachel, according to the small nameplate, handled each transaction with grace. When a homeless man approached, she served him a full meal without hesitation. When a construction worker came up short, she waved away his apology. Each interaction was a masterclass in genuine human connection. "Your total is whatever you think is fair," Rachel told Marcus when he reached the window. Her eyes held no recognition of the tech mogul whose app was reshaping the industry. She saw just another customer, treating him with the same warmth she'd shown everyone else. The food was exceptional, authentic, street fare elevated by subtle fusion touches. But it was the community around the truck that truly captured Marcus's attention. Other vendors stopped by, sharing supplies and support. Rachel seemed to be the heart of this ecosystem, offering advice here, a kind word there, all while maintaining the efficient rhythm of her business. Marcus lingered, observing. He watched Rachel help an elderly vendor repair his cart's wheel, saw her slip extra ingredients to a struggling new vendor, noticed how she kept a notebook of regulars' preferences and dietary restrictions. In his world of data-driven optimization, this level of personal touch was revolutionary. A passing delivery cyclist nearly collided with a suited businessman, splattering the man's expensive shirt with sauce from his Street Karma meal. Marcus expected anger, a scene, perhaps even a lawsuit. Instead, Rachel smoothly diffused the situation with free meals and genuine concern for both parties. The businessman left smiling, his shirt stained but his dignity intact. "That's not how it's supposed to work," James said later, reviewing the day's app data. "That whole street is a dead zone for digital orders. They should be struggling, but that food truck's line never ends." Marcus was barely listening, his mind replaying the day's observations. In his experience, every act of kindness had an agenda, every relationship a power dynamic. But Rachel's interaction seemed genuinely selfless. It didn't make sense in his data-driven world. "I need to understand it," he said finally. "Understand what?" "Whether genuine kindness can survive in today's market, whether community means anything real anymore." Marcus was already forming a plan. "I need to test it." "Test it? How?" Marcus smiled, an echo of his old venture capitalist days when he'd spotted an opportunity to disrupt an industry. By becoming part of it. Not as Marcus Shaw, tech billionaire, but as just another struggling food truck owner trying to survive. "You want to go undercover? That's insane." James shook his head. "The board would have a fit." "The board doesn't need to know." Marcus was already imagining the details. "Think of it as market research, understanding the human element we've been missing. If you are enjoying the story till now, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It costs you nothing, but for us, especially in these early days, it means the world. Let's continue." The irony of using deception to test authenticity wasn't lost on him. But as he looked down at the street where Rachel was closing up her truck for the day, Marcus felt a familiar spark of curiosity. He'd built his empire on understanding systems. Now he wanted to understand something far more complex: genuine human connection in a world designed to monetize it. Marcus's transformation took 2 weeks of meticulous planning. He purchased a used food truck from a struggling vendor in another part of the city, keeping the original weathered paint and dents as badges of authenticity. Through careful research and a crash course from a discreet chef, he learned to make a simple but respectable menu of Vietnamese-inspired sandwiches, something different enough from Rachel's offerings to avoid direct competition. The hardest part was crafting his backstory. He chose to stay close to truth. John Miller, former tech industry worker who'd lost everything in a startup failure, trying to rebuild with his grandmother's recipes. His hands, soft from years of keyboard work, he deliberately roughened with kitchen work and minor burns. He practiced the slight stoop of someone used to working in a cramped food truck space. His first morning on the street, Rachel was the first to welcome him. She approached his truck before the breakfast rush carrying 2 cups of coffee. "First day?" she asked, offering him a cup. "The morning prep is always easier with caffeine." Marcus, now John, accepted the coffee with carefully practiced awkwardness. "That obvious, huh?" "We were all new once." Her smile held no judgment. "I'm Rachel. Street Karma's my baby." She nodded toward her truck, already drawing its usual crowd. "You picked a good spot. The morning office crowd loves trying new things." She was right. By lunch, word had spread about the new banh mi truck, and Marcus found himself with a steady stream of customers. What surprised him wasn't the business, but the community. Other vendors stopped by with tips and encouragement. Mr. Zhang shared his secret for dealing with the afternoon wind that could blow napkins away. A Mexican food truck owner named Carlos offered extra cilantro when Marcus ran low. Rachel checked on him throughout the day, offering advice about health inspectors, sharing the unwritten rules of the street. Each interaction was an opportunity to observe her, to test the limits of her kindness. But what he discovered was more complex than simple generosity. "Watch this," Carlos told him during a slow afternoon. 3, 2, 1. Right on cue, 2 men in expensive suits approached Rachel's truck. Development company representatives, Marcus realized, recognizing the predatory body language from countless business meetings. "Miss Chen," one began smoothly, "we should discuss the upcoming changes to the street vendor ordinance. Perhaps over dinner?" Rachel's smile never wavered, but Marcus caught the steel beneath it. "I prefer to discuss business in the light of day, where everyone can see the terms clearly." She served them each a taco. "No charge. Consider it a reminder that some things are worth more than money." The suits retreated, but Marcus noticed Rachel making quiet phone calls during her break. The next day, a local newspaper ran a story about proposed vendor restrictions, complete with quotes from longtime community members. The ordinance mysteriously disappeared from the next city council agenda. "She fights for us," Carlos explained later. "Not like those non-profit types who show up for photo ops. Rachel understands the street." Marcus found himself sharing evening cleanup duties with Rachel, their trucks parked side by side as the city's rhythms shifted from day to night. She taught him tricks for preserving ingredients, showed him how to spot customers who needed a free meal but were too proud to ask, helped him navigate the complex social ecosystem of street vending. "Why Vietnamese food?" she asked one evening, helping him clean his portable burners. "It's not exactly beginner-friendly." Marcus stuck to his prepared story. "My grandmother, after we lost everything, her recipes were all I had left." Rachel's eyes softened with understanding. Sometimes the best way forward is through our roots. She shared stories of other vendors. Mr. Zhang's dim sum cart representing 3 generations of family recipes. Carlos's truck helping fund his daughter's college education. Her own journey of learning every cuisine represented on their street. What started as an experiment in testing authenticity became something more complex. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the simple rhythms of street life. He learned every regular's name and story, just as Rachel did. He began keeping extra portions for the homeless man who cleaned up litter around their trucks, started a group chat for vendors to share supplier information and weather warnings. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, the creator of an app that was helping destroy communities like this, discovering the very human connections his technology replaced. He watched Rachel's subtle orchestration of street life, how she ensured elderly customers had shaded places to eat, how she coordinated with other vendors to ensure variety and fair competition, how she remembered not just orders, but stories. One morning, running late after a secret board meeting, Marcus arrived to find his truck's generator had died. Before he could panic, Rachel and Carlos had already run power cables from their trucks to his. "Community insurance," Rachel called it with a wink. "We take care of our own." That night, reviewing Urban Eats data in his penthouse, Marcus stared at the app's efficiency metrics with new eyes. Each optimized route, each automated order, represented a lost conversation, a missed connection. The algorithm saw Rachel's variable pricing and inconsistent serving times as inefficiencies to be eliminated. It couldn't measure the value of her remembering that Mr. Zhang's grandson was allergic to peanuts, or that the night shift nurses needed their orders kept warm until their break. "The street's starting to show improved metrics," James reported, pulling up charts. "Maybe we should accelerate the premium feature rollout." Marcus minimized the screens, thinking of Rachel's notebook full of customer preferences and community needs. "We need to reconsider our impact metrics," he said slowly. "There are factors we're not measuring." But even as he began questioning his company's direction, the weight of his deception grew heavier. Each genuine moment of connection with Rachel was shadowed by the knowledge of his lies. The community he'd meant to test was changing him instead, teaching him measures of worth his algorithms had never considered. The morning everything fell apart was deceptively beautiful. October sunlight painted the food trucks in warm gold, and the air carried the mingled aromas of a dozen different cuisines. Rachel was showing John how to properly season his grill when the sleek black Tesla pulled up. Marcus recognized James's car immediately, his stomach dropping as his CFO stepped out in an immaculate suit. Two other board members followed, their expressions suggesting this wasn't a casual visit. "Found you," James announced loudly, his voice carrying down the line of food trucks. "The great Marcus Shaw, playing street vendor. The board's been wondering where you've been disappearing to." Rachel froze beside Marcus, her hand still on the grill brush. The morning crowd of customers turned to stare, phones already coming up to record the unfolding drama. "Marcus Shaw," Rachel said slowly, stepping back. "The CEO of Urban Eats?" "The very same," James continued, clearly enjoying himself. "Though lately he's been neglecting his duties to play food truck owner. Tell me, Rachel, did your friend mention his app is designed to put vendors like you out of business?" Marcus stepped forward, desperately trying to control the situation. "James, this isn't—" "What? Not the right time? When is the right time to mention you're testing authentic community engagement as part of a market research project?" James pulled out his phone, reading from an email. "Understanding street-level vendor dynamics for optimal digital disruption. That was the proposal you sent last month, wasn't it?" The growing crowd murmured. Marcus saw Carlos move protectively toward Rachel, saw Mr. Zhang shake his head in disappointment. Everything he'd built over the past weeks, the connections, the trust, the genuine friendships, crumbled under the weight of truth. But James wasn't finished. His smile turned sharper as he turned to Rachel. "Though I have to admire the symmetry. The billionaire tech CEO and the secret heiress both playing poor. Yes, I did my research too. Rachel Chen, daughter of David Chen, the development mogul who conveniently disappeared when his empire crashed. The same empire that originally drove out half these vendors." Rachel's face went white. Around them, the morning crowd had grown larger, drawn by the drama. Phones recorded everything as she struggled to find words. "Is it true?" Carlos asked quietly. "Your father? He was the one who tried to force us out 3 years ago?" "Yes," Rachel admitted, her voice barely audible. "But that's why I'm here. I've been trying to make things right." "By lying to us?" Mr. Zhang's weathered face showed deep hurt. "All this time you had millions while we struggled." The anonymous help, someone in the crowd realized aloud. The mysterious paid-off loans, the repairs that got funded, the permits that got approved. That was you. Rachel's silence was answer enough. Marcus watched her carefully constructed world collapse, just as his had moments before. The painful irony wasn't lost on him. Both of them exposed, their attempts at redemption twisted into something ugly by the harsh light of truth. "Well," James said with fake cheerfulness, "now that the masks are off, we can talk business. The board's ready to roll out premium features that will revolutionize street vending. Of course, the fees might be challenging for some of the smaller operators." "This was your plan?" Rachel turned to Marcus, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Use our trust to gather data, Learn our weaknesses so your app could destroy what little we have left? No! Marcus stepped toward her, but Carlos moved between them. Rachel, it started that way, but what? You realized poor people are actually human. Got enough notes on our quaint little community? Tell me, what's the algorithm for calculating betrayal? The growing crowd of onlookers had their phones out, recording everything. Marcus saw his carefully crafted experiment turning into a viral nightmare. But worse than any PR disaster was the hurt in Rachel's eyes, the betrayal on the faces of people he'd grown to genuinely care about. Your father would be proud, Rachel said quietly. You found a way to destroy communities even more efficiently than he did. At least he was honest about his greed. She turned to the gathered vendors, her voice stronger now. What you heard is true. My father was David Chen. His company destroyed lives, including many of yours. That's why I'm here, not to continue his legacy, but to try to heal what he broke. Every dollar I have access to has gone into supporting this community. I won't ask your forgiveness for lying about who I am, but please believe that everything else, every meal served, every conversation shared, every moment of community, that was real. Real, Marcus found his voice. Like my feelings for you were real? Rachel, yes, I came here to test something, but what I found was data, she cut him off. Metrics, user behavior patterns. Tell me, Marcus Shaw, when you recorded our conversations, did you categorize them under community engagement or user trust development? James stepped forward, smooth as ever. This is all very dramatic, but we should discuss this privately. The board has concerns about your recent involvement here. The board, Marcus said slowly, years of corporate instinct warring with his new understanding, can wait. But Rachel was already moving, efficiently shutting down her truck with the same grace she'd shown in every task. No need to wait. You've got your data. Your app wins. Isn't that the whole point? The morning customers who'd loved her food, the community she'd quietly supported, the vendors she'd helped, all watched in stunned silence as Rachel secured her truck. Only Mr. Zhang moved, placing a gentle hand on her arm. The help you gave, he said softly, the kindness you showed, it came from guilt? No, Rachel's voice cracked. It came from love, for this community, for what street food really means, for the human connections that happen over a $3 taco. She looked at Marcus. But I guess some people see that as an inefficiency to be optimized away. She climbed into her truck's cabin, started the engine. The sound seemed to break the spell holding the crowd in place. Phones lowered. People began to move, the morning's drama already becoming social media fodder. Rachel, wait, Marcus called, but she drove away, leaving him standing between two worlds, the corporate empire he'd built and the street-level community he'd grown to love. James was already talking about damage control, but Marcus watched Rachel's truck disappear into traffic, understanding too late that he'd tested authenticity by being false, and in doing so, lost something genuinely precious. The street felt wrong without Rachel's truck. In the week following the revelation, Marcus watched from his office window as the community tried to adjust to her absence. Mr. Zhang's dim sum cart seemed to move more slowly, and Carlos's usual cheerful music played a little quieter. Even the morning light felt different, as if Street Karma's absence had dimmed the neighborhood's spirit. The viral videos of their confrontation had sparked a tsunami of publicity. Hash Food Truckgate trended for days, with think pieces analyzing everything from class privilege to corporate espionage. Marcus's PR team suggested damage control interviews, but he shut them down. No amount of corporate spin could fix what really mattered, the trust he'd broken. In his penthouse office, Marcus stared at Urban Eats metrics with new eyes. Each efficiency gain represented a lost conversation. Every optimized route meant another missed connection. The app saw Rachel's practice of keeping food warm for night shift nurses as inventory inefficiency. It flagged Mr. Zhang's habit of giving extra dumplings to students as inconsistent portion control. The board wants answers, James informed him, dropping a thick folder on his desk. "Your little experiment cost us partner confidence. The premium features rollout is delayed, and vendors are leaving the platform." But Marcus wasn't listening. On his screen, he scrolled through hundreds of customer comments about street karma, not just about the food, but about the moments of kindness, the sense of being seen, the community Rachel had built. "We've been measuring the wrong things," he said quietly. "Oh no." James recognized the look in his friend's eyes. "Don't go soft now. This is business, Marcus. Remember what happened with your ex-wife, your son? People use you? That's what Rachel was doing too, playing saint with Daddy's dirty money." "Was she?" Marcus turned to the window. "Or was she showing us what we've been destroying?" Meanwhile, across town, Rachel sat in her spotless apartment, surrounded by evidence of her two lives. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from the community, some angry, some confused, some surprisingly supportive. Mr. Zhang had texted a single question. "The loan payment 3 months ago? That was you?" She'd helped so many people quietly, thinking anonymity kept the help pure. Now, with her identity exposed, every past kindness felt tainted. The daughter of David Chen, trying to buy redemption $3 at a time. The media wanted interviews, offering chances to tell her side. Social justice groups reached out, seeing her as a symbol of privilege acknowledging responsibility. Real estate developers sent proposals hoping to leverage her name. She ignored them all. Instead, she found herself driving past her old spot each morning, watching her community adapt. Carlos had expanded his menu to include some of her most popular items, honoring her recipes while feeding her regulars. A group of office workers had started a pay-it-forward system, trying to continue her practice of feeding those who couldn't afford it. The street was healing without her. The thought brought both pain and pride. Back in his office, Marcus made a decision. He called an emergency board meeting, but not in the corporate boardroom. Instead, he led the suited executives down to the street, to the very spot where his deception had unraveled. "Gentlemen," he announced, "we're going to learn about real community engagement." He guided them through the morning rush, introducing them to vendors by name, showing them the human networks their algorithms ignored. Carlos, still angry but willing to teach, demonstrated how food truck operators shared supplies during shortages. Mr. Zhang explained the unofficial credit system that helped struggling customers eat now and pay later. Every interaction revealed another layer of community that Urban Eats had failed to understand. "Our app is efficient," Marcus told the board, "but efficiency isn't everything. We've been disrupting communities instead of serving them." The board members shifted uncomfortably as he outlined his new vision, an app that would support street food culture rather than replace it. Features that would help vendors coordinate rather than compete. Systems that would preserve human connection while enhancing, not eliminating traditional practices. "You're talking about completely repositioning the company," one board member objected. "I'm talking about getting our soul back," Marcus replied. That afternoon, he did something unprecedented. He posted a public apology on his personal social media. Not a corporate statement, but a raw acknowledgement of his deception and its cost. He admitted learning more about business from 2 weeks on the street than from years in boardrooms. The post went viral for its honesty. Comments flooded in from street vendors nationwide, sharing similar stories of community versus corporatization. Marcus's vulnerability sparked a larger conversation about technology's impact on human connection. Rachel saw the post. Sitting in her empty apartment, she watched the discussion unfold, recognizing the genuine remorse in Marcus's words. She thought about her own deception, her own journey from guilt to genuine connection. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Zhang. "We miss you, both your food and your heart." The message brought tears to her eyes. She thought her anonymity protected the purity of her help, but perhaps it had been another kind of mask. Real healing couldn't happen in hiding. That evening, she drove to her old spot. The street was quiet now, vendors cleaning up after the day's service. Carlos saw her first, pausing in his cleanup routine. Then Mr. Zhang emerged from his cart and other vendors appeared, drawn by her presence. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of truth hanging between them. Finally, Mr. Zhang spoke. "Your father took much from us," he said slowly. "But you gave much back. Perhaps it is time to do so without hiding." The idea came to Marcus during a late-night coding session. He'd spent weeks redesigning Urban Eats from the ground up, but something was still missing. Staring at the street vendor data, he finally understood what Rachel had known all along. Real change had to happen at street level. He found her at St. Mary's Hospital, where she'd been volunteering in the children's ward kitchen. The sight stopped him in his tracks. Rachel, in a hairnet, and basic kitchen whites, teaching young patients how to fold dumplings while they waited for treatment. "Mr. Shaw," she said coolly, noticing him in the doorway. "Here to gather more data?" "Actually," he said, "I'm here to show you something." He held out his tablet, open to a new application interface. It's called Community Kitchen, not an optimization algorithm, a support network. Rachel studied the screen with professional interest despite herself. The app wasn't about replacing street food culture, but preserving it. Vendor-to-vendor supply sharing, customer loyalty programs that rewarded community support, integrated systems for managing pay-it-forward meals. "The board hates it," Marcus added with a slight smile. "Says it's inefficient, too focused on human factors. But that's the point." "Why, show me this." "Because you understand something I didn't. Real value isn't in optimization, it's in connection. Every feature is based on what I learned from you and the street community." A child's laugh interrupted them as one of the young patients proudly held up a lopsided dumpling. Rachel's face softened as she praised the effort, and Marcus saw again the genuine care that had first captured his attention. "The app launches next week," he continued, "but first, I think we owe the community something more important than technology." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "We?" "I've been talking with the city council. There's a proposal to designate the street as a protected cultural district. No more predatory development, no more forced relocations, but it would mean more coming from both of us, the tech disruptor and the developer's daughter, working to preserve what our industries tried to destroy." The idea hung between them, heavy with possibility. Rachel turned back to her young students, showing them how to crimp dumpling edges with patient hands. "Your father built glass towers," Marcus said quietly. "Mine walked out when I was 6. We both spent years trying to prove something through success, but you figured out the truth before I did. Real worth isn't in what you build, but in what you preserve." "And what about your board, your shareholders?" "I'm stepping down as CEO." The words felt liberating to say aloud. "James can handle the corporate side. I want to focus on Community Kitchen, working directly with vendors to develop features they actually need." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, helping a child with shaky hands fold their dumpling. Finally, she spoke. "The street was never about redemption," she said. "Not really. It was about finding purpose. Every meal served, every connection made that became more real than any inheritance." "I know," Marcus replied. "That's what I learned pretending to be John. The food truck life was supposed to be research, but it became home." A nurse appeared in the doorway, signaling the end of kitchen time. As the children cleaned up, Rachel finally met Marcus's eyes directly. "The community might not forgive us," she warned. "Maybe not, but we owe them the chance to make that choice themselves. No more masks, no more hidden help, just honest work, side by side with the people we tried to help from a distance." Rachel looked down at her tablet, still displaying the Community Kitchen interface. The features reflected real needs she'd seen every day, the small kindnesses and mutual support that kept the street vendor community alive. "Mr. Zhang's grandson coded some of the sharing features," Marcus added. "Carlos helped design the loyalty program. It's not my app anymore, it's theirs. Just like the street was never really about you or me." Outside the hospital window, the city sparkled with evening light, glass towers rising above street-level life. But now both Rachel and Marcus saw what they'd been missing before, the vital human connections that gave those streets their soul. "Tomorrow morning," Rachel said finally. "The health inspector reviews new vendor applications at 9. If we're going to do this right, we start from the beginning." Marcus understood. No shortcuts, no privileged access, just two people with a food truck, trying to earn back trust one meal at a time. 1 year later, the street hummed with its familiar symphony of sizzling grills and cheerful conversation. Street Karma's truck had returned, but with a subtle change. Now it proudly displayed Community Kitchen alongside its Karma symbols. Next to it sat a simpler truck serving Vietnamese fusion, its menu written in both English and Vietnamese. Rachel and Marcus worked side by side, their food trucks anchoring opposite ends of what the city had officially designated as the Heritage Food District. The protected status signs gleamed new in the morning sun, each one marking a victory for the community they'd learned to serve rather than save. The Community Kitchen app had evolved beyond its creator's vision, shaped by the vendors who used it daily. Mr. Zhang's grandson had become its lead developer, adding features that preserved traditional practices while embracing necessary innovation. Carlos's daughters, now in college, helped manage the community outreach program during their breaks. "Coffee delivery," called a familiar voice. It was Marcus's ex-adopted son, Jamie, who'd returned not for money, but for reconciliation, inspired by his father's public journey toward authenticity. He worked mornings at the coffee cart they'd helped him start, learning the value of community his trust fund couldn't buy. Rachel's notebook of customer preferences had become a shared digital document, accessible to all vendors through the app, but the technology simply supported, rather than replaced, the human connections that gave the street its soul. Each vendor still knew their regulars by name, still remembered their stories, still served food with a side of genuine care. "Your father would be proud," Mr. Zhang told Rachel one morning, watching her train a new vendor in the art of street hospitality. "Not of his towers," he added, nodding at the glass buildings that now seemed to protect rather than threaten their community, "but of this, of who you became." Marcus, overhearing as he prepared his day's ingredients, caught Rachel's eye. They shared a smile, remembering their journey from masks to authenticity. Their marriage certificate hung in the community kitchen office upstairs. Not a merger of empires, but a union of purposes. The morning sun painted the street in possibilities as vendors set up for another day. Each food truck, cart, and stall represented a story of persistence, of tradition, of community strengthened rather than optimized. And in the heart of it all, two people who had once hidden behind wealth and power now found their richest rewards in simple acts of genuine service.